Whether you're a suburban athlete or an Olympic champion, you've got to work hard to get results. We've put over 15 years' experience into developing Active Man, combining vitamins, minerals and proteins. Active Man helps provide you with the nutrients you need to optimize performance and assist recovery. Discover the Active Man range, now available. Active Man, power up.
Welcome to this week's Power Progress podcast, and on this particular one I have an amazing guest speaker. He's a body transformation coach, fitness model, John Tamas, and also what I found fascinating is actually him and Becky compete together, and originally he didn't, he actually did it on his own, so he actually sort of helped out Becky, and obviously they're kind of both huge in the fitness modelling industry now. Obviously they got a reward this year on Pure Elite for those who are part of that federation. But anyway, I'm going to go into this now because this is a fascinating chat. How they actually help each other with competing in the prep stage, living with each other, and so much more. So you really want to be listening to this one. But let's go now. What got you into shows in the first place?
Oh, good question. I think I was always quite competitive as a person. And I think when I first started going to the gym, there were like a couple of guys in the gym where I was going to that were competing, and they kind of looked at my physique and they were trying to get more people into competing, and they were like, "Oh, you look quite good. Would you ever consider competing or going into a competition?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I've never done it." I was quite competitive, and I was nearly about to get into competing, but then something happened and I just didn't do it. But that's the first time that I ever considered, oh, maybe I should try competing, since I spend so much time in the gym and, you know, something that I do on a regular basis. So that's probably when I first started thinking about competing.
Yeah. Then, so at the time, was you actually a personal trainer as well at that point?
No, not then. So then I was, I think it was a year after that I got my qualifications. Up until then, I'd been training for about 4 years or 5 years or something like that.
Wow! And what was you doing around that time? What was you doing work-wise?
Because I was quite young, I was just jumping from one job to the other. I think I worked in restaurants, then I worked with one of my friends. He was doing like renovations and stuff like that. So it wasn't anything specific. I worked in a casino as well because I built a little bit of muscle. So I was kind of like, someone saw me and I was like, "Oh, you can do doors, or you can do this," or stuff. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's try it out." So yeah. I did.
Would you say you were better at being in front of sort of customers, like dealing with people, as opposed to doing like the construction work?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. Yeah. I worked in a gym as well, and I enjoyed that part of the job, dealing with customers and just, being good at customer service, basically.
Yeah. So cool. What year would that have been when someone noticed you and said you should do sort of fitness shows? Was that about 2014-ish?
Yeah, probably about 2014, I would say, yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, yeah. So it took you 2 years before you ended up getting on stage.
Yes. Yeah, so after that, I was just like, I felt a little bit bad that I didn't do the show so someone suggested a show for me. And I said no to it at the time, but then I felt bad about it. And when another opportunity came, I was working in a gym by that point in a fitness first, and the manager at the time said that he wanted to do a competition, and I was like, "Oh, I wanted to do a competition." So we kind of like decided to do a competition together, but he kind of bailed out like just a few weeks out, and I already started the process and the prep, and I was like, okay, I'm still going to do the show. Whatever happens. There's nothing to lose. Yeah. And that's when I joined. That's when I did the Pure Elite in Hayes for the first time in 2016.
Yeah, because obviously we spoke before we went on record right now, but we literally just missed each other because I done my first Pure Elite show in June 2015. And that year I ended up doing 3. So I done June, which would have been we'll get this right, that would have been in Manchester.
Yep.
First. So that was the first one. And then I went into the September one, which had great success. I actually got my beach body first place with 27 contestants. And then it was the first World Championship, which I went into. And that was where Dan would have been in. They would have been on both.
Yeah.
I'd done him in September.
Yeah.
And then he got first place in the Worlds.
Oh, yeah, Dan Raymond, isn't it? Yeah.
In that one. Yeah, that's
amazing.
right.
Yeah.
And then from there, I decided not to do pure elite. And I thought I wanted to do more physique. And then in 2016, I went towards that and totally realised that wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. And that was when you did the show. And did you do any more shows after that? After 2016 up to this year?
Yeah, so I did 2016 September was my first show. Then I did the World Championship the same year, so that would have been November, I think. And I think I said that that was the first year that they did the World Championship at the O2. And the following year, I think I did April again. So I did the UK Championship, which was in Margate. And the same year, so 2017, I think I did the World Championship in Margate as well. And then the following years, I think I've done about 10 or 11 shows, I think, with the Pure Elite.
Yeah.
So I think 2018, I took it off, and then just a few shows after that. Yeah.
And then obviously now you've went through a little bit of a different type of show because you've actually done it with your partner this time.
Yes.
But that must have been interesting. Was it a different experience?
Oh, definitely, yes. I think the whole process was quite different. Obviously, Bex hasn't been training, so she has been training for quite a while, but she was never really. She never really had the structure that you kind of need to do this to go into a competition. So she was always into training, but she was never really pushing herself to that limit that you need to kind of step on stage. So yeah, it's completely different. But I think we both enjoyed the process. I think it makes it, in a way, a lot easier to compete with someone that knows what to expect.
Yeah, often, because that intrigues me, because Sarah's into just going to the gym, but she's not necessarily wants to be on stage. So I feel sometimes when I'm sort of in, say, shred state, we're in some ways we're in a slightly different wavelength because of that, because I'm on a different journey to what she wants to get out of it. So I was wondering whether it would actually be easier, or whether it does strike other challenges where you're both doing it together, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's very true. I think when we first met, I think on our first date, I was 2 weeks out of a competition, and we went to this pub, and I obviously had some sparkling water, and she had a glass of wine. And back then, she thought, "Oh, this is probably not going to work if he's going to be doing shows, and if he's going to be competing, and we're not going to be able to go out." So it kind of takes away that, you know how it is. It's the social aspect to a certain extent. You won't be able to go out as much. You won't be able to enjoy as many events and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely easier when you're both doing it together. So beginning of the year, this year, I competed in April. So I was on prep for the beginning of the year, and Bex wasn't. But because she'd done a show the previous year, she kind of knew what to expect. She knew that maybe towards the end I would be a little bit moody, maybe I wouldn't have as much energy, we wouldn't do as many things as we normally do, and so on. Yeah.
And with that as well, with, I guess, so in some ways, because let's face it, if you are going toward the show, what I personally do, I would still go out for a meal, but I would strategically prep up for that, if that makes sense, when I'm shredding. And I would find if my partner was doing the same, we could both do that together. Whereas in some cases it might be that obviously she's got used to it. We would go out and she may have a glass of wine or two, and I wouldn't. And also with the food selection, I'd have to be very selective, where she can have the starter and then she could have the main. A prime example of that was my birthday, and we went to a local restaurant called Bekah's. And it was my client, so he actually said, "You got the meals on me." And in the end, I found Sarah actually enjoyed it more than me, because I still had to be selective. Because she actually could have a starter, main, desserts, you can have everything, you know.
Yeah.
So that was where it sort of caused, I wouldn't say a divide, but it had to be a level of understanding, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely, and there's definitely has to be a level of understanding. Similarly, during the summer, so after April, I took a few months off before prepping for the World Championships this year. But Bex started her prep in, I think, early June. So I kind of had about a couple of months, so June and July. I had a couple of months of, eating whatever I wanted to eat, which meant that when we would go out with the dog, we would go out to a pub. I would probably have like a pint. And again, Bex would probably have like sparkling water or something that she could have off the menu. We do have, so if we're far enough away from a competition, we would go out and just enjoy a meal, and even closer to a competition. But like you said, it has to be regimented. It has to be planned well in advance, just so we don't make any mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. And April, because that really, I find that really interesting, because this April coming up will be the first time I'm going to compete. So, do you think it's different prepping for April show to what it might be later in the year?
So I think the main difference with the UK Championship is the amateur division tends to be just a little bit bigger, and the pro division tends to be just a little bit smaller. You're going to be competing with the pros, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's not going to, I think that would be the main difference, but I think it's still going to be, I think Stuart wants to make this next year's April a big show because it's the 10-year anniversary of the Pure Elite. So yeah, it's probably, I think it's going to be just a little bit different in that respect as well. So the pro division might be just a little bit bigger because they're going to be maybe bigger names competing next year, and probably the expectations are going to be just a little bit higher. So going into this is definitely going to be different, let's say, compared to 2022, the UK Championship. But it's definitely going to be a good show, good buzz.
Yeah. And in terms of when you had to get ready for the April show, when would you have started? Would you have normally started after Christmas, or would you have sort of given it until about Feb?
No, I would start, I think for this year's April show, I started just after New Year's. So in January, I started prep for it because I needed. So I think I put on a little bit of weight because I did like a growing phase just before the April show. So I did have a little bit more to lose than what I would normally have. So that's why I started prep just a little bit earlier for me. I usually go like 10 or 12 weeks out. But this time it was like more like 12, 13 weeks out.
Well, I'm thinking because obviously it's cold, or it's colder in January, February, is it harder to fight against your hunger hormones on the months than maybe if you prepped for, say, June, July? Or does it not make any difference?
I don't think it makes any difference, not that I've noticed, but I think the cold definitely makes a big difference. So beginning of the year, I was cold up until like we went to Italy after the show, and that's when I felt just a little bit warmer because it was quite hot outside, obviously. In terms of, I think every prep, I don't know if you've noticed this, I think every prep tends to be a little bit different. So for me this year, when I was prepping for April, I think I found the last couple of weeks just a little bit more difficult. But that's because I started doing cardio just a little bit later into the prep. So, and normally that's what I would do. So I would probably start like halfway through introducing just a little bit more cardio. And I think I should have done it a lot earlier than that. So the last couple of weeks for this prep for April were a lot more difficult. So I had to lower my calories quite a lot to make up for the fact that I hadn't lost as much as I wanted to.
Right, yeah. And of course, it would have been the opposite way. You would have been prepping, but Bex wouldn't have been. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, yeah. But
beginning would be interesting. Switched.
It was, yeah. So I was prepping beginning of the year, then I competed in April, then we went on a mini holiday, then we came back, and soon after that, Beck started prepping. And it was kind of like this whole year was, we didn't have that many social occasions, or we didn't go out as much. So that's why we wanted to take a little bit of time off after the World Championships. So it was like on prep, off prep, on prep again. So it's like most of the year has been on prep, to be fair.
Yeah. So let's talk about, in terms of what sort of foods would you both miss different foods? Like, for example, me, I can give up alcohol, no problem. That isn't one of my, if you like, drug foods is what I would name it as. But my things would be curries and desserts. So they're the things I have to really control.
I see.
But alcohol isn't one of them. I could quite easily give out alcohol, no problem. What would yours be, and what would Beck's be?
For me, it would definitely not be alcohol, because I'm probably the same as you. I could give it up very easily. As in, even now after I finish with the prep, I just didn't have that many drinks. I do like whiskey, but I only have like small amounts and very rarely. In terms of food, I think for me it depends. I go through just phases of, so for this prep, for example, it was pastries, because my studio where I work is close to a Lidl, and you know that Lidl has the pastry section. And it was always it was so tempting just to go into Lidl and do a little shop and go past the pastry section, and it was smelling really nice, and I was like, oh, this is really tempting. So yeah, definitely for me, pastries. 1 year was burgers for some reason, and burgers tend to be like my go-to food after a competition. For Bex, I think it's pizzas, so she enjoys pizzas quite a lot. And maybe chocolate, I would say, probably it's a bit of a weakness in a way. So if it's like,
right, is that for both of you, or that's for Bex?
That's for Bex. I don't know how you found it, but for me, it's like, if it's something that I'm not really allowed to have, in inverted commas, obviously, I'm more than happy not to have it. So, for example, like if it's like a big dessert, or if it's like chocolate or stuff like that, I'm more than happy to leave it, because I know that my goal is just a little bit bigger than that. I know that everyone's going to be stepping on stage. But if it's something like simple, like something that I can get away with, like cashew nuts, for example, I know I can have a handful, but it's really easy from a handful to turn into 2 handfuls, and that obviously will account for more calories eaten and stuff like that. So I think that's my biggest issue.
That is really interesting you said that, because I was just talking to someone the other day, which led to my post yesterday, I think it was, where I was saying a comparison between shred and lean bulk. And I can honestly say I've never properly achieved a lean bulk. It's become more of a dirty bulk in the end. And it's precisely what you've just said there, because you give yourself permission to have something which is classed as all right. I actually see it as, I'll call it an operative food, and that's something which actually is healthy, but you still got to manage your calories with it. But they're too easy to overindulge in, like you said there, the cashew nuts. So what I find is, in the moment when I'm having a handful, I'll give myself permission to go, well, you've got extra calories, why not have a bit more? And then the trouble is the floodgates open, and then you lose a bit of discipline.
Yes.
Whereas I find in shred state, because you don't give yourself permission to have that little bit in the first place, your brain doesn't get overexcited. So I find it easier to control in shred state. So this is like an interesting area I'm in, which obviously I've tried to control it better by literally physically putting a drug food section in my fitness pal. So when I do have it, I literally put it in there so I can see it. So there's an element that I can control at least how many calories as a percentage I have in a week. Yeah. And I'm hoping that's going to control that part to not get overexcited, you know?
Yeah, definitely. On that, saying a similar idea is, sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you as well, like sometimes people ask me, oh, could you not have, instead of 2 rice cakes, could you not have 3 rice cakes? Well, I can probably get away with it, but that is that discipline, isn't it? So if you let yourself have another rice cake, then next time you're probably going to allow yourself to have another one and another one, and that's kind of like you said, opens the floodgates, and that discipline kind of goes out the window a little bit.
Yeah, it's probably the only part of my, if you like, my year cycle I need to get better at is that lean bulk. I feel like I've absolutely mastered being in the shred. I actually enjoy it. I actually don't find it grueling at all. A lot of problems what I have when I'm in shred is the social events, and it isn't actually my problem, it's other people's problem with it. So that's, but in saying that, I feel like my close circle, I feel like they've now got used to it and they feel it's fine, you know. But that's always the challenge when you are going out and I'll have a drink and you're like, nah, it's all right, I'm just going to have this. I find for me it's totally fine. It's everyone else's sort of concern, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. It's, are your friends quite understanding towards what you're doing? You're competing, and
yeah, I think they've really got used to it. They really have, and I think, and like I said, you've got your direct circle, and you've got people outside of that circle who are kind of acquaintances and stuff like that. They may challenge it, and you may get this as well. When you are in shred state, you get, why don't you eat some normal food, or oh, you're looking a bit skinny in the face today, and things like that. But it's taking a step back. It's because it's not their normal. You see what I mean? And in some cases, not for everyone, but actually unconsciously, it gives them permission to do what they're doing by challenging you with that. So I understand that. So I don't really get offended by it anymore. Whereas maybe in the past I would have done. Whereas now I'm not that bothered. You know?
Yeah. At the end of the day, this is in a way an extreme sport. It's extreme dieting for stepping on stage, isn't it? We get to like whatever single digits body fat. It's definitely not an easy process, and not everybody will understand it, and that's absolutely fine. Not everybody will agree with it.
Yeah. I mean, as a couple, is there any challenges what you think you really have had this year with switching over with your prep and also both prepping together? Is there any sort of things that really hit home where you go, we wouldn't necessarily have that challenge if we weren't doing it?
Can't really think of anything in particular. I think this, because we're doing both, we have kind of like the same goal. Everything else in our life kind of aligns with that. I think, the biggest challenge was mainly the going out. Obviously, we were loads of invitations from our friends. Would you like to do that? Or would you like to do that? And, you know, at some point, those invitations kind of like stopped coming because they knew what the answer would be, especially if we would be getting ready for a show. I think, yes, the social occasions would probably be the biggest challenge. But again, like you said, not necessarily for us. It would be for our friends. And, you know, we value our relationships. And I think that's still very important to us. And, you know, the people that our closest friends understand that. It's just, like you said, it's to the acquaintances that probably are not on the same page, that probably have never done this, that don't really understand what it is. But apart from that, I can't think of anything else that was a big challenge. As a couple, we don't really have arguments per se.
That's really good.
Because energy and, you know, mood is just really low. I don't think we've got the energy to argue, to be fair. That's what we said.
That's so good.
So in that respect, I think we did quite well.
No, that's brilliant. That's really good. Have you got any final thoughts of someone like myself who has a partner who doesn't compete? What would make us compete? Have you got any something that pops in your head that, Nath, you really should do that? We should get two of you to do it together. Is there anything that pops in your head?
I think I think I told you the story. So the way that Bex got into competing, obviously because she had my influence and I was doing it, but one of my friends was competing and we went to see her show. It was one of the pure elites. I invited Bex if she wanted to go and see the show. She said yes, and she saw the international model round, which is like the dresses and the gowns and the flashy, the model look, and she enjoyed that. And she was like, "Oh, I kind of fancy doing that." I think firstly and most importantly, they have to kind of be into training and going to the gym. And secondly, I think the fact that I didn't say anything, I didn't pressure her into kind of doing doing a show really helped, because it's that dynamic of boyfriend girlfriend, isn't it? I don't want to tell her to do what to do, if you know what I mean. So I just let her make her own decisions, I think, when it comes to that. Yeah, I think that would be the best advice that I can give you. Just take her to a show and see what she thinks about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. And just before you go, if someone needs to contact you, have you got any direct details, what you'd like to give? Is there would you like to guide people to your Instagram, your Facebook? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, my Instagram is John Tamas Training, and my Facebook is John Tamas Fitness. That's where you can find all of the details, and you can get in contact with me.
Brilliant stuff. I don't know what, it's been great to talk to you, mate. I'm going to let you go to do what you do best. And
thank you for having me on.
No problem at all, yeah.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
See you soon, mate.
See you soon.